Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center. Welcome to Knife AQ number 33, the knife series where I answer all your questions whether they're sharp or dull. Got some fun stuff, as always, you guys know I like to say that, but among other things we're talking about this week, we're going to be asking the question, have pocket knives gotten too expensive? Let's get into it. So as always, before we jump into the questions, a big thank you to everyone out there who has left their questions down in the comments for us. We have a lot of fun combing through and picking things out. If you want a chance to get one of your own questions answered in a future episode, do the same thing. Just drop them down there in the comments. All right, first question for today comes from Chris Gonzalez. A fun question for you. Who are your 3 favorite knife designers, fixed or folder, and one of your favorite designs from each? The only rule is you can't choose yourself. Thanks as always. Of course, I wouldn't choose myself. That'd be tacky. I had to think about this one because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ignore the fixed blade side of the equation. I'm going to go to folders, just because I happen to know a lot of fixed blade designers very well, and sometimes it can be hard to separate the man or the woman from the design. So I'm just going to avoid that altogether. Easy way out, maybe. But not really, because it actually made my job harder. There's good stuff out there. I like a lot of things from a bunch of different designers, certain elements from a certain designer. I always appreciate this about them, or I always appreciate this about another. But there's not really any designers out there where I'm always, I'm following them, like following their every move, and I love what they're doing so much that I'm obsessive with it. So I had to think about this a little bit. But what I'm gonna go with is the first one for just someone whose designs I almost universally always appreciate. I love his clean lines, and that's Brad Zinker. You may know him from his the Boker Urban Trapper series. It's certainly very popular, and those are a great representation on the production side of things. And we get some of his customs in here too, and I always make it a point when we get a new batch to go find them and at least look at them, even if I'm not doing anything else with them video-wise. This is his Urban Barlow. This one comes in just under $700, handmade by him, of course. And there's just an elegant simplicity to his design. And there's something that's always recognizable about his designs too, which is hard to pull off with that same simplicity at the same time. Always impressed by that. 3-inch blade on this guy, CPM 154, nice elegant shape. Burlap micarta for the handles, signature style of his deep carry pocket clip. I dig it a lot. As for for the next one, the designers who I own the most of, that's gonna earn the second place, and I gotta combine them here. Eric and Sal Glesser from Spyderco, because I probably have more knives in my collection with that little maker's mark right there, that Sal Glesser logo, than anything else. So by default, that's gotta be it. A lot of stuff out there. I've really been digging the Para 3 lately. I just picked up one of the Para 3 lightweights. Interestingly, I used to not really be a fan of the compression lock, but it's grown on me a lot over the years, and I don't really, it doesn't annoy me as much as it used to. I quite like it, in fact. So that's probably not the kind of name you were asking for, but I gotta give it to him. Third and finally, for someone whose designs just by and large are always excellent and has actually had a pretty good amount of influence on me in the way I sketch out knives, even though I don't own any of his folders right now, and that's Jesper Vaknaes. Just another guy who has a mastery of clean lines. Obviously a little less quote-unquote simple than the Brad Zinkers, but just as sophisticated. This is the new Karakurt Autos under the Boker brand, but made by Hogue here in the US. It's just one of those things where you kind of always know it's a Vox. He's established that style over the years, which is really nice to see. And I like the lines on this knife very much. So yeah, those are the 3 I'm going to go with today. But yeah, thanks for the question. It made me kind of think really hard, and I like those. Thank you very much. All right, next one, Ninja Nobi. I purchased the Ontario RTAC 2, and on my first use of the knife, I had a large chip out of the blade, cutting a long branch about 2 inches thick into smaller lengths. Just chopping away, using a bigger fallen tree as a work surface, and noticed a piece missing from the blade. I think too brittle a heat treat or maybe a micro crack in the steel. What should I do? All right, I'll hold up. I don't have an RTAC today because we didn't have one on filming day, but here is the Rat 7, very similar. And actually we've got the SE Hungless 2, which the RTAC 2 is kind of the predecessor to the original Hungless. We'll get to some of that a little bit. In answer to your question as to what should you do, warranty. First thing, first and foremost. Never be afraid to give a company a chance to make things right, especially in the knife industry. Even some of these bigger companies out there aren't really all that big in terms of the grand scheme of things. And Ontario's US knives do come with a lifetime warranty, so take advantage of that first off. Because the thing with diagnosing why something chipped, it can be hard to tell. If you're not an expert in heat treating, it's gonna be real hard to tell if it was a heat treat issue or if there was a cracking issue. Someone's really gonna need to analyze that. But in all likelihood, they'll just take care of you straight up. One of the things to note, you talk about normal uses of the knife, chopping branches on another wood surface. Yeah, something like that's gonna be done all the time with the RTAC. One thing interesting though, just kind of a side note, is certain woods out there, especially pine, which is a soft wood, but pine is notorious for having super, super hard knots, like harder than a lot of steels out there. And if you hit that, especially with something like the RTAC, which doesn't have a super thick edge, it's got a full flat grind, the edge is fairly fine. If you hit that, even if you're dead on, but especially if you're just at a slight angle off, be real easy to take a big chip out of your blade. You'll see references to stuff like this easily as far back as Horace Kephardt's book, where he talks about not wanting to put his axe into pine for that very reason. So it's just one of those things to watch out for. But yeah, like my key takeaway here would be, especially with a company who offers it, don't be afraid to give them a chance to set things right for you. I'm sure it's going to be taken care of. All right, next question is actually a mixture. I kind of combined a few questions from a few different people into one because we've been getting this a lot lately in our comments and just wanted to talk about it for a minute. So your channel doesn't really support the middle to lower class of workers, does it? I sure can't afford to pay $130 for a pocket knife, and I simply fail to see the point of dulling a blade on a premium knife doing mundane tasks like slicing cardboard. Yuppies have destroyed the knife game. Nice knives are now unobtainable for normal people. A lot in there to unpack, so I'll go through it a little bit. I would argue just broadly that yuppies have ruined the knife game, with brands out there like CJRB and Civivi having taken off in recent years, where you can get a ton of really premium feeling features for like $50 and less. There are plenty of really fantastic budget knives out there these days, and we absolutely support that. We've done several videos talking about budget knives and try to feature budget and more expensive stuff in each video. But I can understand where that kind of backlash is coming from, because you see a lot of really high-priced stuff out there. I'll take a real high-end production piece here. This is a Shirogorov Unihation collaboration with Chris Reeve. And this guy comes in at like $2,300, which is almost as much as Thomas paid for his truck over there.
A lot more than I paid.
A lot more than, oh yeah, that was, okay, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, you could almost buy 2 of Thomas's truck that he bought over there.
Almost.
So I understand your point, but just because you're seeing a lot more new releases on the higher end of things doesn't mean there's not also a lot of great budget releases coming out. The reason you see more of these higher end releases in our videos is just quantity wise in terms of actual new designs. There are going to be more, but in terms of units moved, far smaller than the budget stuff, like those Civivis, like a lot of those budget stuff out there, budget things out there especially. And the reason for that is just economies of scale. To get a knife like this Elementum right here with ball bearings in the pivot, D2 steel, nice flipping action, at a $50 price point, you need to make a lot of them. And in order to make a lot of something, the company has to really believe in it and has to know they're going to get a return on their investment. So that's what you see happening there. But on the higher end spectrum, especially the higher end production, not talking necessarily about full-on custom makers, is they can afford to take chances on some more unusual designs because they don't have to make as many. But if you're not making as many, if your production system isn't as streamlined for real mass quantities, it's just going to cost a little bit more. That's kind of the nature of the beast. And one of the ways to counteract that, to make up for the difference, is they'll use more premium materials. So, you know, it wouldn't cost them, it would cost them less to make this this Unihation with materials like you see on this CVV, but the price is still going to be pretty high. So you'd want to see some premium materials going on. And there's a market for it. You know, I hate to say, I don't want to say yuppies have ruined the knife game just because a lot of people are spending a lot of money on knives. That just means the market is there for us as knife enthusiasts. It's getting bigger every year. We've seen it. And, you know, it used to be like Chris Reeves. They've been around forever. They've always been a lot more expensive than your garden variety folding knife. And other makers have seen, other high-end production facilities have seen, there's more money out there for everybody. All in all, dude, it's a really good thing. All right, next question comes from Thomas Wood. What would be a good knife for a river kayaking camping trip? Sure, I got a few here. For any kind of camping trip, I'm always going to gravitate towards a fixed blade, but in the interest of showing more, I'm also going to give you a folder here. And when talking about any kind of waterborne expedition, my mind immediately goes to Spyderco Salt series. We've been showing it a lot recently, but it's just going to work, especially on these latest versions with LC200N steel. This is the Salt 2, comes in about 1/16. You can get it with a fully serrated edge, and if you were doing something where if you have like ropes you need to worry about, you might want that serrated edge, so keep that in mind. You've also got a blunted tip here, which is less of a concern maybe on a hard-shelled kayak, but any kind of tubing or anything like that, rafting, that might be more important. These are nice and lightweight too. Come in, where is it? 1.9 ounces, which is really light. And you've got that LC200N steel here, almost completely rust-proof, and you get a lot better edge retention than the H1 steel, which is completely rust-proof, but you can get that option with these if you want to spend a little bit less. But I also wouldn't hesitate to recommend a Mora, and we're gonna get into some Mora specific questions lately because there have been a lot that just the answer is Mora, so we're gonna do it. This is the companion. This particular one comes in at 17 bucks, nice and affordable, and it's got these the green color on this one too, which is you see on that Salt, which is a pretty good color for seeing if it is like submerged in some murkier water. But these things are great. Lightweight, you've got a Sandvik 12C27 stainless on the stainless versions of these. It's gonna work well in those camping scenarios very nicely. It's gonna be very resistant to water. You've got a nice hard plastic sheath here with a drain hole at the back. You get the rubber overmold on the handle for more grip when things are wet. And you can get one of these in a serrated style as well, if that's what your needs are. That also comes with a blunted tip. So definitely check these guys out, because the other thing we don't want to talk about all the time when we're talking about things where we're doing things on the water is you might lose it. It might fall overboard, and it might fall overboard in a place where you've got no hope of getting it. At $17, it's going to be a lot shorter cry fest than the money on that Spyderco Salt. It's just the reality of the situation. So sometimes the less expensive knife is absolutely the right choice. All right, next question comes from Chase Reichert. What survival/bushcraft knife would you recommend for a beginner? I just started out in the survival world. Sure, I just talked about this just a little bit actually in the best survival knives under $100 video that we did earlier this week, where we had several options under the $50 mark too, and that's where this one's gonna sit, because budget buyers need knives too, we know that. And it's gotta be the Mora Bushcraft Black. It is kind of, in my mind, like the encapsulation of that crossover between the bushcraft and the survival world. You've got a nice Scandi grind, which is more typical of the bushcraft stuff. You've got the sharpened spine, which is also the same case for that sort of thing. But you've got a handle that's a little bit more towards that tactical and outdoor crossover segment that makes up kind of the survival knife genre. You've got that nice finger guard there. It's going to keep your finger from slipping forward. You've got a nice comfy rubber handle on this case as well. Not a Full-Tang, it's partial, but it is quite strong. And you've got a nice acute tip there at the front to be able to pierce well with, in addition to doing all that other bushcrafty stuff. And I've kind of talked about this a little bit before too. I don't remember exactly where, but when you think thematically, at least, the difference between survival and bushcraft, with bushcraft, the central core ethos is you're heading out into the woods to thrive. Like, you're going into the wild. With survival, you're trying to get out. So even though there's a lot of skills that are going to apply to both, it's a different game basically, and that's why you see knives kind of tailored a little bit differently to those two different genres. All right, next question is from G. Bay. Hello DCA, in your opinion, how useful is the type of compound grind found on the Mora Knives bowl for camping and bushcraft tasks? I think it's very nice actually. Here it is right there. This one comes in about $40 for this particular cans bowl. It's got the newer burnt orange color. And it's a really good hybrid grind here, a compound grind going on. You've got Scandi technically all the way, does continue all the way to the edge, but the actual flats of the blade have been scalloped away or flat ground away so that you have a thinner cross section behind that Scandi ground edge. And it's really nice because what happens with a Scandi grind typically is right at the edge, it is more narrow, it's more acute than a typical knife with a secondary edge like that Spyderco. But the further up the shoulder you go, the thicker it gets sooner than something like that flat ground knife. So being kind of that double planed chisel type of thing works great for wood especially, but the higher up you get, you're gonna be fighting that shoulder if you go into longer slices. That's why I tend to prefer knives, Scandi ground knives, 1/8 of an inch or less. 3/32 is even better. This one is nice and thin, so it doesn't suffer from that as much as some designs can, but for even better performance, even better slicing, that scalloped section out there near the front is absolutely going to help. You're going to be able to slice better, whether you're using this in kind of hunting scenarios. When you need to skin with that, you're going to have less resistance there. If you're doing any kind of food prep, you're talking camping, that's also going to be very helpful there. So I really like the way they've done this. I don't have a cans bowl personally, but I've got one of the old Mora 2000s, the Mora 2K. Used it for years and very familiar with kind of the advantages of this. And I think they're very, very useful indeed. All right, that's our Mora content for the day, which means that brings us to the lightning round for today. Starting with Jim Griffin. David, can you speak about pivot lube? I want my folders to open smoothly, but I'd rather not introduce anything too poisonous for when I slice up my PB&Js and so forth. Thanks a great bunch for the content, or thanks for a great bunch of content, and darn you for making me spend too much money. All right, with this one, I won't make you spend too much money. When it comes to lubricants out there, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of high tech, like nano oils and all kinds of stuff that work really well. But I go low tech. I like just plain old food safe mineral oil because one, it's food safe. Like that's, especially if that's your top concern. There are high tech oils out there marketed as being food safe, but mineral oil is a classic. It may not be as high tech, but it does just plain work. Works in pivots and it works in all kinds of other things around the house. You can treat cutting boards with it, wipe down wood handled knives with it. I think they even use it as a laxative, which is why you can find it in like pharmacies and drugstores. The stuff's available everywhere. It's cheap and just plain works. All right, next question is Chris Gonzalez. I think, wait, did he ask one earlier?
He has two on there. Chris
Gonzalez, you're in here twice, you lucky sumnagun. I'll try not to let that happen again, folks. I'm very sorry. Chris says, I think the Hogue Deca with the modified Wharncliffe would suffice well for the question about the Cleaver-Style with the crossbar lock. That was a good call, actually. Last week, someone was asking for a crossbar lock alternative to the Gerber fastball cleaver. While this isn't quite that kind of Cleaver-style blade, in terms of crossbar locking knives out there, it's probably as close as you're gonna get. Made in the USA, really high quality. Set or stonewash blade versions of this start at about 140. You've got 20 CV steel, G10, and a really nicely tuned lock going on. So price-wise, it's right about the same as that Gerber Fastball. Very similar kind of blade length. Maybe that's a good option for it. Next is from Steven Seaborn. You should have showcased the Full-Tang Mora Garberg in your best survival knives video instead of the partial Stick-Tang Bushcraft Black. That would be a more appropriate comparison to the rest of the knives shown. I guess we're not done with our Mora content. I don't have a Garberg in front of me, but it has the same handle as that Cans Bowl right there. And when we're talking about survival knives, there are a few things I look for, and the Garberg is a great knife. Wouldn't say anything otherwise, but it lacks one of the key features which I rank as highly important in the quote-unquote survival knife genre, and that is a prominent finger guard. You've got a little bit here going on, but if we're talking about the Mora lineup, the Bushcraft Black, I think, is just a better choice. And say what you will about the partial tang out here, it's been around for years, this particular knife at this point, and there have been countless both professional and real-world use reviews out there of this blade, and it has proven to be very highly durable. So I would certainly trust this knife. I'd have no qualms about that whatsoever. All right, next is from Crisco65. DCA, you mentioned toughness versus edge retention. I'm a little confused by what you mean by toughness. Wouldn't a tough steel hold an edge well, or does tough mean less brittle in this situation? Essentially, yes. Simplifying things way down here. But the tougher a knife is, the more resistant it is against things like shock and vibration, which especially in a survival knife, especially if you're really thrashing on a knife, that might be happening. Deflection too, it comes into the toughness side of things. But the harder the knife gets in any given steel, the less tough it is, just kind of on the broad spectrum. Edge retention itself has more to do with the abrasion resistant qualities of the steel. Toughness can come into play there in kind of certain scenarios, but to keep things simple, yeah, the less tough a knife is, the more brittle it is, but toughness and edge retention are kind of two different metrics in terms of what we like to talk about with knives. All right, next question is from Tech Zach. I've got my eye on a Para 3 lightweight, and I've been super pleased with the S30V blade on the standard Para 3, but it isn't offered on the lightweight. Would SPY 27 be a good substitute, or should I stick with the BD1N and save 35 bucks? This is the SPY 27 Para 3 lightweight that you mentioned, which is Spyderco's new proprietary steel, and a powder metallurgy steel made by Crucible, the same folks who make S30V. And by all accounts I've been seeing so far, it should get you right around in that same ballpark as the S30 family of steels. Not identical to any one of them, but kind of in a similar range. This is, I've picked this one up. I've been using it a little bit, but I haven't really pushed this knife too hard yet to where I'd be expecting edge degradation, so I can't report personally, but I'm pretty sure you're gonna be right in that range. So if you like the S30V and you don't mind spending the extra money on the SPY 27 version, I'd go for that one. All right, next question, Tim Frost. What knife would you recommend for a premium large, as in an 8-inch blade or bigger, survival tactical knife? Chop, baton, bushcraft, skin, camping, slicing, etc. This is the part where I would have picked up that R-Tac that we don't have on the table here, but instead I grabbed the SE Hunglis 2, which is a little bit shorter than the standard, coming in right over 8 inches. It's gonna do everything you need. Let's see, price on these guys, coming in about $180, a little bit over. And it's gonna be able to do the light chopping stuff. Another good one's the Becker BK9, but I recommend that kind of as a default, so I wanted to show something a little bit different here, since you guys have heard me recommend that knife before. You got multiple hand positions for the chopping, choking up, especially like so if you need to do some finer work. The one thing that's gonna be a little bit more difficult is skinning, because you got this big old blade, and the thing to do in that case, take a lanyard on the hole here, thread your arm through it, and you can actually support the weight of the knife with your arm and grip the front end to do that skinning. All right, next question from Larry E. Morse. DCA, I got into a friendly argument with another guy in the comments section somewhere, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'm saying that a razor blade utility knife is a Wharncliffe, but he disagrees. What do you think? Well, given that it's a friendly argument, that's good to see on the internet. That doesn't always
Not always.
Doesn't always hold true. We've seen that firsthand. But in the spirit of some good old-fashioned internet trolling, you should tell them that that's a reverse Tonto. It's a Rexford utility tool right here for those of you who are interested. Reverse Tonto. Clearly.
Okay. Yeah.
It's pretty obvious. Anyway, that's it for the lightning round, which brings us to our last question, which is a new segment we're dubbing the most seriousest of questions of the day. And it comes from Jeremy 2. What is the best 3-blade system for the zombie apocalypse? I shouldn't enjoy these zombie questions, but I do. I'm not going to pretend I'm too good of a person to not have thought about this, at least a little bit. So we're going to do it. So when we're thinking about kind of what's the zombie apocalypse, really the situation is long-term survival with some offensive capabilities built in. I showed my BK5 last week when somebody asked a zombie question. But since that's no longer available, I'm going to do a different knife, and I'm also going to do it all three under $100, so we can hit a good budget, which we're talking about a little bit today. First one, I'd go with a Mora Companion. Stainless or carbon, take your pick. You could even go with the heavier duty one if you want, with the 1/8-inch thick carbon steel blade. But one of the things, if you're on the move constantly, weight is a concern. I already talked about the lightweight nature of this knife. And any kind of long-term survival scenario, food procurement is going to become an issue. So doing any kind of like bushcrafty trap making and that sort of thing, you know, provided you have the skills and you know what you're doing, that could certainly come in handy for that sort of thing. Thin enough blade on these where you can do the some of the smaller food prep without the thickness of the Scandi, top of the Scandi shoulders getting in the way. And it's nice and pokey, so you can use some real close quarters offensiveness on that guy. As for the main blade that I would take, I'm going to go right now with the Ontario SP5. Just nice big old buoy, but again, not super heavy. It's balanced pretty well. It's 15 ounces, so just under a pound without the sheath. Blade itself is 10 inches. You've got 1075 carbon steel here, so plenty tough, 1/4 inch thick. It's definitely going to be a solid knife. You can do some machete stuff with it. You can do hack and slash with it. You got a rubber grip there. I'd usually prefer a solid grip, but you can't have everything for all three of these under $100. And it actually balances out pretty well when you choke up on the ricasso here to do some finer carving and stuff like that. So that would be the main blade. As for the third blade, because we're talking a 3-blade system here, I would go with the Cold Steel Special Forces shovel. $20 right now, not bad at all. And that SP5 is just over $50. And I'm gonna go with this again because, you know, we're talking long-term survival, and this is gonna be able to come in handy more than just a zombie thing. Any kind of digging tasks with it. You can do machete type stuff with it thanks to these sharpenable edges. And you can do, you know, tending your fire if you're keeping the flames low, of course. Just so much you can do with a good solid shovel like this, and it's certainly going to be fierce when it needs to be. And if anything ever happens to the handle on this, you can always replace it pretty easily as well. So all of that comes in about $90. So I'd say that's pretty good.
Not bad.
Pretty successful. We'll go with those three. Let us know y'all's three down in the comments. But that's all we've got time for today. Thanks for the questions. As always, make sure to leave your questions below. And if you have any super serious assist questions, make sure to leave them down there as well. If you want to get a chance, if you want to get your hands on any of these knives, make sure to follow the links in the description to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program too. There's a link up in the top right of our website where you can get all the details, but basically, when you put down your money on one of these knives, you'll be earning some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center signing off. See you next time.